Hello, my name is Patrick, and I got a bachelor's degree in information design, so you don't have to. Today I'm going to be talking about how to use a design concept called visual hierarchy to create a better research poster. And if you stick around to the end, I'll share with you a designer's secret. So what hierarchy does is it places emphasis on content that's really important for your user to be able to quickly see and identify, and it minimizes other content. As far as how our user is going to be using your research poster, not everything is equal. When a design has a lot of content, like on a research poster, it can be really overwhelming when all that content looks the same. Where do you start? How do you navigate through the poster? I think all of us already use visual hierarchy in our designs. Like, we already make our titles bigger, and we already make our subheadings larger than our body text. But just to make these concepts explicit and actually think about them, we might be able to create an even stronger visual hierarchy. So what a strong visual hierarchy does is it guides the audience through the poster. They're going to know exactly where to start with your big title and where each section is on your poster. And what it also does is it creates harmony within sections. By having a tiered system within your sections, it will make the section itself cohesive and it will separate itself from other sections, which in itself will reduce clutter because each of your sections will be clearly separate from the other ones. So how do you create a visual hierarchy? Well, there's a lot of graphic design elements you can use. And to name just a few, position is one of them. So if you're, a Western audience, your eyes are going to naturally go to the top left corner of a page because that's how we read, from top left to bottom right. Another one that's obvious is size. I think we use this one a lot already. The bigger it is, the easier it is to see. Alignment is another way to create visual hierarchy, which kind of plays with position and creates this nested feeling. So playing with typography is another great way to create visual hierarchy, and so is color. And I'll spend the rest of this video talking about those two things, typography and color, and how to use them to create a strong visual hierarchy in your poster. And these two things are often used, but never really used intentionally enough, even though they can be some of the easiest ways to create a strong visual hierarchy. So starting off with typography, you should think about your text as having different levels. And each level should be going from the boldest, the biggest, the most eye-attracting, down to your body copy, which doesn't really attract the eye, but that's not its job. So your first level usually is the first thing people are going to see when they look at your poster. This is often your title or whatever you want the audience to first see. Your subheadings should also be big and bold and should be pretty easy to see from far away, and they're going to show the audience where each section is and let them know when they've come to a new section. Now, your lowest level is always going to be your body copy, and it doesn't need to stand out from a distance because that's not its job. That's the job of the subheadings. So if you organize your type like this, it'll create a really easy way for the audience to navigate around your poster. As academics, I don't think we often think about which typeface to use, but as a designer, we can spend hours choosing a typeface. I kid you not, once when I was getting my bachelor's in info design, we spent an entire hour-and-a-half class looking at two W's in two different typefaces, and just talking about how they made us feel. And that might sound really boring, but it was actually a pretty interesting exercise, because different typefaces and fonts really do convey different personalities. Just a little fun fact. So what we normally call a font, like Times New Roman, is actually a typeface. And a font is actually the typeface and the weight, like bold or regular, and the point size, like 12. So use that little tidbit to annoy people at dinner parties now. So as far as choosing a typeface, I'm going to give you two options I think you should probably stick with. The first option is just to choose one typeface with lots of different contrasting weights. And by weights here, I mean the different actual thickness of each letter. So you can see here that the font I use on this slide has a lot of different weights from light all the way to black. And an easy way to create hierarchy is just to use these thicker, darker, bolder fonts as your higher level text and your lower levels to be the lighter versions. They're always going to look good together because of the same typeface. So there aren't a bunch of different typefaces that are pre-installed on your computer that are going to have a bunch of different weights like this. One of them is Arial. It's a classic. Usually comes pre-installed on most Macs and Windows PCs. Another option is Helvetica. Also a classic. It's always going to look good. However, if you want to get more creative, you can actually go online and find new fonts and download them to your computer to use. So one great place to go is to Google fonts. So if you Google fonts, you'll find a web page that is full of different fonts with a bunch of different weights. All right, now I'm down here. All right, so Google fonts. So you can see that there's a bunch of different font families. And most of them will have a bunch of different weights. And it'll tell you how many styles or different weights there are for each font. So Roboto is a classic. Click on Roboto. And you can see all the different weights that it has. Thin up to black. Just download the font family to your computer and you can use it on your poster. So your next option is going to be to use one serif typeface and one sans serif typeface together. Never use more than 2 fonts on a single design. It's kind of like the first thing you learn in typography school. So for those who don't know, a serif font is one that has these little doodads, the little like flares at the ends of the lines in each level. These add a lot of character. They often seem pretty historic. They seem fancy and elegant. Whereas a sans serif lacks those doodads, and they're a lot more clean. They're more modern. And sans serifs are really popular today. So if you want to be in vogue, I would choose a sans serif. But nothing wrong with a serif either. And if you want some advice on how to choose 2 typefaces, a serif and a sans serif that look good together, there are an endless number of blogs that will give you some great advice. Usually you want to find a serif and a sans serif that really contrast each other. Alright, so moving on to color. And color is another great way to create visual hierarchy because color is really going to draw your eyes to certain places. So how do you choose a color palette? Well, my advice would be to keep it simple. In other words, don't do what I've done here. 1 or 2 different colors is going to be usually good enough for a research poster. And unless you have a reason to kind of go crazy with the colors, I would try to rein it in a little bit. So for those who don't know anything about color theory, a good way to find 2 colors or 3 colors that work really well together is to pull up a color wheel. And these will show you and help you guide you through which colors look good and which ones don't look good together. So if 2 colors are next to each other on this color wheel, like red and orange or blue and green, those are called analogous colors, and those are going to look really good together always. They kind of create this sense of harmony. 2 colors that are on the opposite sides of the color wheel, like purple and yellow, red and green, blue and orange, are called complementary colors. They create a lot of contrast, but that's still pleasing to the eye. If you create a triangle on the color wheel, like red, blue, and yellow, these are called a triad. It creates a lot of balance. They look really good together as well. At least red, blue, and yellow do. I'm not a huge fan of purple, green, and orange together, but hey, prove me wrong, make a design with those 3 colors, and maybe I'll enjoy it. All right, and now time for a new segment called Pats Don't Do That. It's got a rhyme. I'm going to tell you what not to do that I often see done on posters. Please don't put text over bright colored backgrounds. It's just pretty hard to read. It's especially egregious if the text is also a bright color. If you do this... Ooh, sorry, I don't have a policeman's whistle, just this penny whistle. I don't know why I have a penny whistle. But I'm about to send you straight to design jail. This is one thing that really hampers the usability of posters that I see all the time. Don't make it harder for your audience to read your text. If you do want to use text over top of a color, what I suggest you do is use a tint or a shade. So tints are just lighter versions of a color and shades are darker versions. And this will make it just easier to read and not so intense on the retinas. Okay, and now time for a designer secret. So if you want to put text over a black background, using 100% black can actually be a little harsh on the eyes. But 95% gray, it's perfect. Alright, in the next video, I will show you how to implement this concept of visual hierarchy, especially using concepts of typography and color, into our poster on InDesign. Bye!